Welcome to Feeling Beings Who Think, a podcast project that seeks to find wisdom in conversation through the stories and personal reflections of regular people like you and me. My name is Ariane Rice, and I'm really grateful you're here. So let's get started. To open her chapter on awe and wonder in her book, Atlas of the Heart, Brené Brown quotes the author Rachel Carson, who wrote this: "If I had influence with the good fairy who is supposed to preside over the christening of all children, I should ask that her gift to each child in the world be a sense of wonder, so indestructible that it would last throughout life, as an unfailing antidote against the boredom and disenchantments of later years, the sterile preoccupation with things that are artificial, the alienation from the sources of our strength." That is an incredibly beautiful quote and actually aligns with a prayer I often say after we baptize, or some would say christen, a child. We ask God to encourage an inquiring and discerning heart, the spirit to will and to persevere, the gift to know and to love God, and the gift of joy and wonder in all God's work. Well, today my guest is Sally Thomas. Sally Thomas has been learning and pursuing wonder, it sounds like to me, throughout the entirety of her career. She has done that as a nurse practitioner, and now as somebody who has pursued theological education and has a doctorate of ministry, and a joyful, fun website to explore called the WonderingTogether Project. And I'll have a link down below in the bio. I am so grateful to Sally for taking time for this conversation. I don't want to talk too much about it. I just want to let you listen to it. I think it is so apropos in this time of Advent, in getting ready to celebrate light coming into the world. And we talk about ways in which there is wonder, even when we are saying goodbye, even when something hard is happening in our life. Actually, how using the question, I wonder, can be really helpful when we're feeling a little lost and confused about what it is we're supposed to do. So, my friends, thank you for listening to this. And I certainly hope and trust, actually, that this conversation invites you to wonder to yourself, too. Hi, Sally Thomas.
Good afternoon, my friend.
It is so good to see you, and I'm really grateful that you took time and we are getting to talk for this slightly less than an hour on a rainy day here in Baltimore.
It's rainy here in Maine too, so
okay.
I feel the same vibe, except we both are smiling like really brightly. So I think we're turned away from the window or something.
No, because we're excited. We're excited to talk about wonder. Because so I will start. What prompted me to want to reach out to you to have you on my podcast was several months ago, I was sitting at my desk at church thinking, how do I get... One of the challenges at church right now is not having children present. We don't have kids and children in the way that we used to. Mm-hmm. How do I connect with children that have been in this congregation? What can I offer online so that families can do stuff online? And I go to the great oracle of Google and just type in whatever random sentence of getting kids connected in church or connecting online with families in faith. And then it leads me to a video series. And then I click on the link to the video series, and it's your smiling face leading godly play. And what the listeners don't know yet is you in Maine leading this godly play online are connected to a family in my congregation here in Baltimore.
Absolutely. And just to take it a little bit deeper, I don't know if you know that my husband and I were in the same confirmation class at that same church in seventh grade, and didn't know it until we moved into a house. We've been married 34 years, about, 20 years ago. And we opened up our pre-1979 books of common prayer that were inscribed on the day of our confirmation with the names of the people in our class. And to my surprise and shock, my husband and I were in the same class.
Oh, so you didn't even remember him?
No, it was, I guess, pre-hormones or something. But so we go way back, and I'll even add that, if I may, that in that particular church, which has a, is my heart home, or has been for a long time, I had the first opportunity to see adults take children seriously. I was able to be an assistant Sunday school teacher when I was in the 5th grade to the first graders. And then there was this terrific man named Wayne Barry.
Yes, I did his funeral.
And well, he took teenagers seriously. He took teenagers seriously and wanted to know what we thought about public events and about life outside of church. So it's ironic and sweet, and just the fact that we found each other this way, because there are roots very deep in that parish in Ruxton. So it's cool.
And the word I heard you say, am I correct, is that the church is your heart home?
Well, it's where I was planted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that phrase.
Yeah. It's where I was planted. So
that immediately leads me to a question, because, these two words, you said you saw adults take children seriously. And how is it that wonder and the experience of wonder is something we also take seriously?
Yeah. So I think for me, I love talking about this, but wonder has two different meanings. The awe kind of, oh, wonder. And also the real genuine question is, I'm wondering about something. I want to stop. I want to pause and pay attention. And I'm going to go with sort of the latter, wondering, for a minute, because I think that's where the recent research I did and what got us talking is, when we stop and say, I wonder, there's all sorts of echoes in that language. There's an invitation, right? There's not a demand. I wonder what you're thinking, maybe implicit, but I'm wondering about. And there's also this, come join me in wondering. And there's this level playing field, like, I don't have all the answers. I wonder if you've been wondering about this too. So if you're genuinely, for me, rooted in the idea of wondering together, finding partners to wonder about important things. And if you're settled and not in a hurry, then wonder is spacious and full, invitational, and it transcends age or generation, right? But we have to set the table for wonder. So we have to be ready. Yeah.
So then I have to know, utilizing the same metaphor, and this is by way of also inviting you to say a little bit about who you are.
Oh,
but how was your internal table set? What led you to that table to want to learn and study and be with this thing of wonder?
So I think as we all do, I'll speak for myself. I've been fortunate enough to have no original thoughts of my own, but be exposed to a lot of people, and like being a bee, kind of cross-pollinating with people. And I graduated from high school in 1981, and we had all sorts of opportunities then. But I was the oldest of my family, and I knew I needed to go to work. And so I went right off to nursing school. I wanted to help people. I thought I had a calling. And I started to pay attention. I was really young. And in the course of starting a children's hospital in oncology, and then getting my social justice on that I didn't even know was there by working in a family planning abortion clinic in Boston for a while, I then went to work during the AIDS crisis for a high-tech home care company that was giving medications to people who were dying at home, people with AIDS. And I learned what a family really was. And it was not the kind of family that had been defined for me in my very regular sort of life. Families were people who showed up. They were people who said, what do you need? And I'm going to stick around.
Yep.
And I'm getting sort of teary thinking about that. So aren't I lucky in the stress of all that sort of drinking from a fire hose learning, to have learned all that in my 20s. And then my husband and I had these two little children who, asked important questions really early. They didn't say, what's life about? But they said why all the time. And the whys got deeper and broader. I'd say at the same time, we, like many young families, found our way back to the Episcopal Church. We'd taken a little vacation, and I volunteered to teach Sunday school. And I mean to tell you what a hot mess it was. There was glue and glitter and pandemonium and make and take sheets. And it was stressful. So when a really dear friend of mine with children the same age, we decided to go off to a workshop one Saturday morning, and both of us were nuts because we were working full time and really, really tired. But we went and we sat in a circle with someone who was doing Sunday school differently. And like Parker Palmer talks about this third thing, if we put something in the middle and don't have to overstimulate each other, we can just look at the thing in the middle. He laid out this simple story. It was the parable of the Good Shepherd, felt flat figures, very boring looking. And he told this story into the circle, so we could just listen. And then when it was all over, he started to wonder. And he said, I wonder if the sheep here have names, and I wonder if they're happy in the sheepfold. And I thought, oh my, this is just basic. What? And then people started talking, and they said, oh, maybe I'm a sheep. But then his wondering got deeper. It was almost like breadcrumbs drawing you in. Mm-hmm. And I was just taking it in. I was too scared to say anything. There were maybe 20 people sitting on the floor. And then he said, because the lost sheep was part of the metaphor in the story he told, he said, I wonder if you've ever been lost. And tears started pouring. Here I was, a young mother. I was trying to make it by then as a nurse practitioner. I was tired. I was so tired. And I just, felt a lot of feelings. And that simple question, I wonder if you've ever been lost, was not demanding, but it was a spark to say. And then after hearing that, and then with a long pause after people had talked, he said, I wonder if you've ever been found. And I thought, I think I'm being found right now. I think the Holy Spirit's nearby. But anyway, so that was Jerome Perryman, the founder of Godly Play. And I am, very interested in the concept of godly play, a Montessori way to share the stories of our faith. But then wonder entered my lexicon in a much broader way. Mm-hmm. I could use that phrase to get to the heart of matters. If I took the time to the heart of my own matters, I wonder what's going on. Mm-hmm. I could say to myself, or I wonder, or I'm sensitive. So I take everything personally. I would always be like, I wonder what I did to that person. But then after a while, I start to go, I wonder what's going on with them. And it was transformational because I felt partnered with other people and with God. And I felt like I had this new way of unlocking important discussions. I was using it I was working at Massachusetts General Hospital at the time. I was using it at Mass General with my patients just to say, I wonder if there's anything more you want to tell me that we haven't talked about today. I wonder if I've missed anything. I wonder. And it just became like one of the most important tools in my toolbox. So,
Can I pause you for a
yeah,
moment?
please. I'm sorry to talk so much.
No, not at all. It's so beautiful listening to this. And I have many, many questions. So this idea of wonder, I was just having a conversation with a colleague, Christopher, that I think is released today or something. And we were talking about how he was invited into spiritual practices in his household, but they were not forced upon him. And one of the things you're talking about that I don't know godly play very well. Some people will know that on here, some people won't. But just generally, I do know that it's different from the classic Sunday school curriculum of this is the story, this is the takeaway, this is the lesson, now go do it. It's very sort of regimented.
Right.
Whereas godly play is this invitational connection, meeting children wherever they are by not having right or wrong answers. And it sparked in you as an adult, one of the key components of why I even started this podcast. We want to believe that we are thinking beings, but the truth is we are feeling beings who sometimes think, is that we often go straight to judgment with something that comes into our head. Even the description of, I would be sitting right next to you, my friend, when this godly play was introduced, and I would have been like, why am I wasting my time with this nonsense? Right? So
Yep.
judging, but then to be able to shift to curiosity. Oh, I wonder why I'm judging. Oh, maybe something interesting is happening here. Can I just put that aside for a second? And it never occurred to me, and this is beautiful. Now I'm going to take your tool and put it in my toolkit. I could also choose to say, I wonder. Oh, I wonder this, and I wonder what's going on with this person. And the thing you said too about family, when you were talking about working with people in the AIDS crisis, particularly at that time when it was pandemic, it was a pandemic.
It was, yes.
And seeing how family is people who show up.
Yeah.
Family is not, and I did another episode that talked about belonging to yourself, and this idea that's really ingrained in us that we are supposed to belong to our family. And in truth, I do believe family is sometimes people you choose and people who choose you because they show up, they hold themselves, they hold you accountable. And when you see that in times, particularly of grief and sickness and really needing to be with people, it's really powerful. And it really does expand just the idea of the human family and the ways in which we can, be there for one another. I can't imagine how impactful that must have been, at that young age too.
Yeah, it was. Well, what a privilege. And, I don't believe in magic, but I do believe in synchronicity and God.
Mm-hmm.
And we have 2 adult daughters now, and, the wisdom when the world tells them, find your passion, go do it, it'll be great, is the path forward is not straight. Right. You don't know. And I know a bit about your story, and you know a bit about mine. The path forward is not straight, and yet it's your path, and it gives you these unique opportunities to live into who you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super cool. I just wish I'd appreciate it when I was going through the stormy parts and knowing they'll be coming again. But yeah, so that was part of the path. Part of the path.
The other thing that occurred to me that I talked about sharing on this podcast together was how you and I were just present together in a funeral for your mother-in-law, who was a matriarch at the Church of the Good Shepherd, and, really represented something you're speaking to that doesn't exist now. And I know that's hard in terms of, a lot of congregations, particularly my size, are struggling with this. And the whole world is, if you look at the Pew Research, yada, 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 all these people that were really engaged, and it was really a center part of community life. And it just is not in the way it once was. And we had a note that was a full service, right? It's a big family and very beloved here. And it really felt like Easter Sunday to me.
Yes, it did.
We sang those hymns, and it was fun. It had an energy that was good.
It was great. It was
Yeah,
great.
and there's just something to me, and I do believe in good funerals, and I think they are these places of wonder because two things happen simultaneously, and it just creates such an incredible sacred space. And sometimes I stand in that pulpit when I'm going to speak in a setting, and when I can feel that in the room, I can start to feel it right now. I get so overwhelmed with what I see, like the people. And I one time I said in a sermon, I wish you all could see what I see from here.
Yeah.
Like all these faces, and they're sometimes they're asleep. I'm not gonna lie, right?
Sure.
Sometimes on a Sunday they're asleep. That's fine. But sometimes they are eager for wonder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God, am I going to be able to satisfy this thing that I really believe is present? Because we are longing. A lot of us are lost, and if we're not in this moment, we have been at some time. And how do you to recognize that just the desire for that, it will be fulfilled?
For sure. I just want to stop and I'm going to stop you and say, I want you to appreciate your own tears. You always call us to appreciate ours, or I've heard you say that. So not that they're pouring down your face, but tears are so important to stop and appreciate. And I just want to appreciate yours for a minute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so this reminds me, I did read the first chapter of the thesis. And what's the website? It's the Wonder Project, right?
WonderingTogether.org. Wondering Together. Wait a minute. Let me check. I should know my own website. WonderingTogether.org.
Okay.
Sorry, isn't that embarrassing?
No.
Yeah, but yeah.
But the story you share at the beginning, when you talked about sitting in the back of a church and watching a family. Mm-hmm. And can you tell that story?
Sure. So our family's moved 5 or 6 times across the country, and it's been a blessing and a challenge to have to reinvent my professional self each time. But when we landed in Denver, I had the job of a lifetime. I was the minister to youth and families at a Episcopal church in downtown Denver. And over time, I just can't say enough about the experience. But in that role, I would have to hop in and out of worship for something. And in our practice, the children for the liturgy of the word, the first half of the worship service, were hearing the stories of our faith. They were doing godly play or something else. And they would come in the midpoint of the service and join their families for communion, for the Eucharist. And I sat in the back of the church once all the children had found their families. And I had this almost like you might from the pulpit, but sort of this bird's eye view of children joining their families. And I mean, nestling up together. I mean, shoulder to shoulder, like puppies kind of. And as we talked about, I've been going to church for a long time. And it used to be, can I please sit with Johnny with my friend? Or can I go out? Or can't we go to the playground or whatever? But something had shifted. And this was maybe 2014 or 2015. And what had shifted was children seemed to be hungry, like their little internal souls called them to be knit in with their family. And I wondered, what's going on? This is really different. It's beautiful, but what is it? And I just started to think a lot about that. And I had simultaneously been thinking about all the screens in our life and the distractions and the neurobiology of that and all that. And I wondered, and my sort of thinking was, this is one of the few times in the whole week that parents don't have their phones out, and children don't have the distraction of an iPad or a phone. And human beings are amazing. And I think they seek what they need, and children especially so, because they're less, they have less filters in place. And I think they needed that kind of contact, knowing their parents weren't distracted, even if they weren't looking at each other.
Mm-hmm.
And once I kind of had that aha, I wanted to know more. But have you experienced that, or have you seen that kind of behavior?
I have seen it. I've seen it also in the school, because we have a preschool.
Right.
And what has been so surprising for me is, well, parents' eagerness to participate in the chapel kinds of programs that we do in the school, it's really just chapel. But in the past, there hasn't been such a desire. The parents just haven't usually shown up when we've invited them to something.
Sure.
And I turned to the director at one point and asked, "This is so weird." And she just looked at me. She's like, "Well, they haven't been allowed in. For 2 years, they weren't allowed to connect in any way with their preschool age children in school." And it takes a minute, but I can remember what an incredible, huge deal it is when your child starts preschool. It is the beginning of goodbye.
Yes, it is.
Every day is the beginning of goodbye in a way. But and I wanted to see everything that my daughter did in that school. And I see it also with the children nestling with their parents. And I don't know, this pandemic in particular, that thing you're talking about and wanting your parent, and it is much more prevalent that I see. And I also think the flip side of that's one of the reasons I don't see families with children as much in church.
I think that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's true. That's what I'm seeing as well. And so, that the invitation is, what's Jesus inviting us to do with this new way of being? Mm-hmm. How, or what's our faith life? People for millennia have been passing down stories of their family, or stories that feel important, or stories that don't feel important, from generation to generation. And we're so busy, and we're so plugged in, and we're so soundbite driven. But we know that stories, narratives, the arc of something is important to how our brain works. Our brains need stories. And we used to have them going to 4-H club or church. Certainly we used to have places to hear long stories, or to hear short stories, or to pay attention without distraction. And with those opportunities being limited, we're really putting even more pressure on families at home, mm-hmm. to nurture all that stuff, and do so, in a siloed sort of way. Figure it all out.
Well, and the other aspect of the stories and modeling the storytelling, and then utilizing invitational phrases such as "I wonder," is that you are passing on a tradition of storytelling in terms of listening to stories, which makes me think of the chaplaincy work you do. And you do it now too, right? You work in a hospice or a retirement.
I work in a Jewish retirement community that was founded by our Jewish brothers and sisters, but has all sorts of people living there, but is one of these great big places. So it's got all sorts of neighborhoods. So I see people who are in independent living, both. I offer a group and I offer one-on-one pastoral care, and then people who have, assisted care and nursing care and memory care. And I use the same stories from Godly Play, those same third things to put in the center of us. And the wondering is just as profound and deep, for people who, maybe even more so for people who've lived full lives, because they have so much to share. Mm-hmm. But it's funny you should ask, because just a couple weeks ago, this is weird. I took that same parable of the Good Shepherd, and imagine, just a green piece of felt and some brown felt that holds some sheep in a makeshift sheep pen, and there's some movement on there. But at the end of the way we tell this parable, the sheep make it back to the sheepfold, and we sort of close the gate. And so I was wondering, with the people who are living there and will not leave this place with some severe cognitive impairment, I said, I wonder if the sheep like being in the sheepfold.
Mm.
And it was profound how they all agreed, or the people who were present said, that's like living here. We can't leave, but we don't want to go. Mm-hmm. We're safe here. This feeling of safety. Mm-hmm. And so I think the stories that we tell don't have to be baby stories or stories for, they just are for everybody. And we unpack them together, see where they go.
Well, and also, this is also just connecting with this previous conversation, this idea of being held. Mm-hmm. And that's what I hear you seeing when you saw that family in church, those children. It is that safety and love and trust that I would think is the sheepfold metaphor, that God is holding us, or the divine or the higher power. We are held in something that is good at all times and in all places, no matter what is happening around us. And that is an internal orientation. And we can cultivate it. I think parents cultivate it with children, teachers, all adult people. And then I think part of our work as adults is learning how to cultivate it in ourselves, which is, I think, very difficult and really important part of taking care of ourselves. When I did my chaplaincy at a hospital for the 3 months of CPE, and being so terrified of walking into those rooms and thinking I was going to be met with questions that needed answers, crises that needed solutions, problems that needed to be fixed. And the very wise rabbi who was my supervisor saying, Ariane, the only thing you need to do is invite people to tell their story. That's it.
Best piece of advice any of us could ever get. Mm-hmm. And a chaplain colleague of mine, and I've worked in a hospital and I have this placement now, which I love. But a colleague of mine said it best when she said, chaplains are people who loiter with intention. I
love that.
And I love it too. Loitering's maybe not got maybe linger with intention, but the idea is that we're one of the few types of caregivers moving through any system, whether it's the world or a hospital or a church or whatever, who don't have to go to that next thing sometimes, or if we do, we can set it aside. Mm-hmm. And we can wonder what's going on, even in the situation. I wonder if that nurse needs to talk to me. I wonder. I'm gonna stop and pay attention just a little bit longer. And I say that with some sort of frame of reference, only because I have been a nurse. I have been a nurse practitioner, and we always had to jump in and fix something, or answer the question, or be the person that the people needed. And I loved. It was a great job. Don't get me wrong, but this is just the opposite. It's more sort of palms open, feet anchored, heart ready. What's going on, and what am I being called to do here? And it's a spiritual practice too for us, because we all have to move and we all have to be busy. But isn't that true too for families, where sometimes we need to practice just being together, just listening,
Yes, which I think a prerequisite of that is an individual in that family, the adults in particular, need to be comfortable just being with themselves. And I just have to say, when you're telling the story about or loitering with intention, yes, I hear you, or lingering, whatever, but that's genius. And I'm going to keep it in mind in a really good way. Recently, I was working with a team of chaplains at a hospital, a pastoral care team, to do some work with the Brene Brown stuff. And one of the clear challenges in a hospital, which is an organization that makes money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And how do you quantify loitering, lingering with intention? How do you quantify a skill set that is incredibly necessary in very intense situations to have the presence of mind and spirit to notice, figure something out that isn't about solving or fixing, knowing you're not the doctor or the nurse, and quantifying that time on a chart that's all about the amount of time things take so that things can be monetized as like they need to be, because this is the world we live in. So I understand it. I'm not saying it's a right or wrong, but I'm saying it's really challenging. And the same thing in a way is true with cultivating leadership capacities. When you work in executive and leadership coaching, one of the primary things that you're working with individuals as they move into higher levels of leadership, how do you cultivate that ability to stay present, to stay calm and in a discerning mode when there is a crisis happening around you?
Yeah.
So we recognize how valuable it is, and yet how do you quantify that?
Well, and you really you can and you can't. Different systems are figuring it out. But here's a little perspective on my world. I don't actually work for that nursing home. I am a contractor for a chaplaincy contracting system because agencies no longer can commit to chaplains on the payroll. They know they want them, but they don't want all the things that go,
right,
the payroll, the reviews and all that stuff. So I actually have this permanent position as a contractor, because they value having a chaplain around, which is great. But I I'm not there nearly as much as I think could be helpful. And anyway, I just want to echo that I hear the challenge and all that, and I hope the pendulum swings a little bit more to these soft ways of being, soft to the people who need hours. I have a friend here in Maine who's a social worker, and she gets monitored for her time on her keyboard, right? Wow. Keyboarding. And if she's not on her keyboard, now social workers interact with people. They're paid to interact with people. They're gifted. That is their call. And yet she, metrics for her job have to do with how much input she's inputting on a keyboard. So wow. I lift that up as we have a lot of work to do.
And well, yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday talking about, in some ways, the fullness of my professional life, which I'm very grateful for. And what was reflected back to me in the conversation was, yes, you sound really busy and we're very busy people. And I thought, this person is not, that's not what I was trying to say. And okay, I get that. But because I do think we also have a tendency to be like, oh, I'm just so busy and my schedule's so full. And I've done this too. But I do try and be deliberate in cultivating time that's for thinking and wondering and priming the pump, which is something Brene Brown would say, for being ready to be in those situations so that I can, have a presence of mind.
Yeah. You can't show up cold. Your instrument has to be ready and attuned. And yeah, I just want to echo that. And then we need to even, I feel, people, if we're paying attention in this way, isn't it also our call to implicitly model that, and say we're taking time for this, or, I can or I can't or whatever, because it takes the time it takes to do things well. I just think it's even true around these big conversations around life and death. One of my dearest friends just entered hospice yesterday, and that is big and important. Well, thank you. She's a gift, and this is the time for that. But we have done so little normalizing the fact that this is part of the arc of the gift of this life, that people, and I'm not saying this exactly about her, but people who love her feel robbed and angry and And I think this is one of our roles as people who are paying attention, is to talk about hard things in a way that doesn't feel so hard, but that makes us safe to talk about those things. Because we're perpetuating this myth that the right school, the right dietary needs, the right amount of exercise, and and children are getting it passively or actively, and that's and especially with the amplification through COVID. So I just
you're making me so. Yes, I mean, I guess part of me wants to talk about how I really believe, the thing I was just saying of we're practicing goodbye all the time.
Yeah.
I believe this so much. And I don't know when I think it struck me in a very mundane situation. I was saying goodbye to a friend at an airport. It was a good friend, but I hadn't seen her in a long time and didn't know exactly when I'd see her again. I knew I'd see her again, but I didn't know exactly when. And I started to cry. And she was like, "What are you doing?" and I was like, "Well, I don't know, but I'm saying goodbye to you. And in truth, I really don't know when or if I'll see you again. And I loved you, and I just love having this time together. And my daughter going to college, like I am every day. And I'm not trying to be maudlin, I'm not trying to overthink it, but she is going to be starting the beginning of the next beginning. And it's not what it's been,
No,
as you well know.
Well, and even well knowing it, it's just so let's I'm gonna in a way circle back to the beginning of this conversation about wonder, and wonder takes time. Saying goodbye takes time, meaning a kiss on the cheek goodbye may need to be our ordinary daily thing, but what are we saying to children when we press their shoulders or press their cheeks between our hands and look in their eyes and say, "I hope you have a really good day. I am going to miss you." It's not the words we say, it's how we say it. And that takes time.
Yeah.
And I see that too in my work in the retirement community, and just having said goodbye to, my mother-in-law, who was the best mother-in-law in the world, to be able, I'm looking at her picture right here. I think the takeaway is if we're going to embrace this tool of wonder, let's make sure we give it the time it needs, even if it's an extra beat or an extra second or an extra 2 seconds or an extra part of our day.
The preparing piece, and so before I press record, we talked about the day when I came to say prayers at your mother-in-law's bedside, and the family was gathered. And what was a wonder for me to see was, in the midst of somebody dying in the room, the life of transitioning was happening around her in a way that included her, even though she wasn't conscious. But I do believe that something was conscious in that space with us.
Yeah.
And women were folding clothes, and things were being moved around, and stuff was happening with daughters-in-law, and sons were there, and planning was happening. And there is a wonder in that. And that requires practice to be able to create, again, that word invitational, which is also a way of not controlling a situation and doesn't have that rigid anxiety that oftentimes also can accompany that transition moment in families. It's, and I'm sure you've experienced too, going into hospital situations or a hospice situation where practicing goodbye has never been allowed or encouraged or is a part of it. And the intensity of anxiety, the fear, the certitude with which things are trying to be controlled makes for a very uncomfortable vibe.
Yeah.
In the way the word is. And it's also heartbreaking. And you see it sometimes at funerals too, because there has been no preparation in that capacity.
Right. And so when you invited me onto this podcast, I was pretty clear I have no answers, and I'm definitely sure I have no original thinking. But I want to kind of say or think, I did this research for this doctorate and really invited 12 families, however they define families, some with 1-year-olds, some with teenagers, some with adult children living at home, to ask each other the same 5 questions every day and put their phones aside, give it 5 minutes. And if they missed a day, no big deal. I didn't care what time of day. Some people did it while they were walking the dog. Some people did it while they were brushing their teeth, whatever worked. And the parents of the tweens and teens said, I don't think this is going to work, but I want to give it a try. And by the second of the month, people were doing this practice. Kids were coming home and saying, I know what I'm going to tell during this part of the practice, which is, these little, I know what part of today I wanted to take out, or da, 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 da. And so everybody was paying attention to how they moved through their day differently, knowing that they were going to check in every day. And so, and then at the end of the month, the children who participated, the families with teens and tweens who participated, to a T, every single participant, the children said to their parents on the Zoom, can we please keep doing this? Can we please keep doing this? And it wasn't that there was anything magic going on, but I think children want to tell their stories. But to your point earlier, they want to hear other people's stories. Yeah. And it doesn't take that long. But to be known and to know, we need to sort of set up a ritual or a structure, or that we can trust that someone's going to listen when we lay it down. And I think I guess what I'm trying to say is, I've spent so much of my life in professions that were reactive, fixing things or responding. And I've really gotten clear in the last couple of years that I really feel called to proactive, to getting in front of things as a person myself, and with my family and with my work, talking about difficult things or practicing saying goodbye, so that the tools are in place. And you don't have the families at the funerals for whom this is so upending and traumatic.
So I have to ask, what are those questions?
So there, if you listen, you will hear the questions as part godly play, part Ignatian examine, part emotional intelligence. So the invitation was to anybody who's gathered in that family to answer the first question and then move on, take turns leading it. It's always an invitation. You don't have to answer, but go back to that breadcrumb analogy from earlier. We start and invite one another deeper. So maybe even do this yourself right now. Maybe we can do it together. Yeah. I wonder what part of today you liked the best.
Oh, well, this conversation, that's definite.
Me too. So, and then everybody gets a chance to answer, and we did. And then the next question, a little bit different. I wonder what part of today so far has been the most important part of your day.
I had a good staff meeting at work that was important, not always just what we accomplished. Yeah. So, I don't have to explain it away.
You don't have to explain it to me. You're welcome to, but just even savoring the thought. And I just want to reflect that your face is saying this was important, and it surprises me that it's my answer. And my husband's away for work, and we had something important to talk about this morning by phone, and it was really, I love him, and it was very sweet. So that was the most important part of my day. And then the next question is, when did you have the most energy today, or when have you felt most alive? And for people who are active in their faith life, I sometimes take it right to the Ignatian question. When did you feel closest to God today? So this was secular research I did with people. I didn't ask about their faith background. So when did you feel most alive today, or have the most energy, or feel closest to God? Pick one of those.
Oh, that was early this morning. I'm up very early and was very filled with joy at beginning.
Great. And I get to walk in the woods every morning with a dog who has recently been sprayed by a skunk, and she stinks, but it was just, I just love the woods. So that's the third question. I wonder when you had the most energy today, or felt closest to God, and or felt most alive. And then the fourth question is a really important question. I wonder what part of today you could have left out and had all the day you needed so far. And you don't have to answer it.
Okay. No, it's just, you know what? Honestly, it was a little bit of my judgmental attitude and being a little snarky. I could have definitely left that out.
Well, and it doesn't always have to be self-effacing. It can be, whatever. But I spent from 2 hours this morning doing really mundane, terrible stuff chained to my desk. And the reward was knowing we had this interview this afternoon, but I played this game. I had to do this so before I showed up to meet with you. So I could have left that part of the day out. And then the last question is simple. I wonder how you're feeling in this moment. How do you feel right now?
I feel filled with wonder. Yeah.
And I feel settled, and I'm really smiling from ear to ear. And that's the practice, which is, like I said, I've had no original ideas. It's just an amalgam of things that is a proactive way. And now, because I've been back to seminary again and been in this doctoral program, I have this lexicon to say it's an act of public theology, right? It's an act of looking for God in the world with people who are in the world. So that's sort of practical public theology, and
that's wonderful practical public theology, and it's also a wonderful way to invite people into an intentional conversation.
Yeah,
which is something I believe our public discourse needs more of. And I want to reflect something back in this project of building people up. And my coaching ear has noticed that you have said 3 times in this conversation that you have not had an original idea. And I hear you, and I hear what you're saying, remembering very well sitting once in a seminary class thinking, as we were learning some sort of theological history overview, I was like, wow, nobody's had original ideas. Like every single idea you learn has surfaced at some different time and place. And then you learn about perennial wisdom. However, the storytelling and the gift of the wisdom of stories is that the original idea isn't what's important, but your unique and original story is what puts this flesh, honestly, incarnational truth around the original idea.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I guess I want to honor that this has all been gifted to me, and I was able to have it coalesce, and I'm grateful for that. I feel so, I have no words right now. I'm grateful for this conversation. I'm grateful that I've gotten to do this work. And I'm in this chaotic, complex time, I feel hopeful. Not with the blinders on kind of hopeful, but there are pieces we are all contributing.
Yes.
And they are what hope looks like right now, and what love for one another looks like. And so thanks for the invitation to be together.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for this beautiful conversation, and thank you. And I hope to have another one again sometime in the new year.
Sounds fun. Take good care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.